The sun was setting over the quiet countryside of Suffolk, England, casting a golden hue across the fields. The crisp November air carried the scent of damp earth as Eric Laws trudged along a well-trodden path, his metal detector in hand. He was a retired gardener, but his true passion lay in searching for hidden treasures beneath the soil. That afternoon, his friend, Farmer Peter Watling, had called him with a simple request. "I've lost my hammer, Eric, probably somewhere in the East Field. Could you give me a hand finding it?" Eric, always eager for an excuse to use his metal detector, had agreed without hesitation. After all, finding lost items was part of the thrill. Each beep of the detector held the promise of discovery, even if it was just an old horseshoe or a discarded nail. As he walked through the freshly plowed field, he swung the detector in slow, methodical arcs. The machine hummed and whined, occasionally beeping at small bits of scrap metal buried in the dirt. But then, something unexpected happened. A sharp, clear signal rang out, a tone different from the usual scattered beeps. Eric paused. His experience told him this was something metallic, something significant. Kneeling down, he began to dig carefully, his fingers brushing against the cool, dark soil, and then something gleamed. It wasn't the hammer. It was something far more intriguing. Eric's heart pounded as he uncovered a cluster of silver spoons. Then, beneath them, glimmers of gold. His fingers trembled as he brushed away more soil, revealing what looked like ancient jewelry. This wasn't just a lost tool. This was something extraordinary. The realization sent a chill down his spine. He knew enough about history to understand that he had stumbled upon something incredibly rare. But what was it? And who had buried it here? Eric hesitated. He was just a man with a metal detector, not an archaeologist. If he dug further, he might disturb something that had been lying undisturbed for centuries. With a deep breath, he stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands. There was only one thing to do. He had to call for help. Eric Laws stood motionless, staring at the gleaming fragments of metal beneath the soil. His hands were covered in dirt, his breath shallow with excitement. He knew, without a doubt, he had found something of incredible value. But what? And more importantly, what should he do next? He glanced toward the farmhouse in the distance, where his friend Peter Watling was likely finishing his evening routine. The temptation to dig further gnawed at him, but Eric had spent years combing the countryside with his metal detector. He understood one fundamental rule: when in doubt, call the experts. Gathering his composure, he carefully covered the exposed items back with loose soil. With hurried steps, he made his way to Peter's farmhouse, pushing open the wooden door. "Peter," Eric said, his voice slightly uneven, "you won't believe what I've just found in your field." Peter raised an eyebrow, setting down his mug of tea. "Let me guess, another old horseshoe?" Eric shook his head. "No, Peter, this is different. I think I just found treasure." The room fell silent. Then, without another word, Peter grabbed his coat. Moments later, they were both standing over the marked spot in the field, the cold night air brushing against their faces. Peter crouched down, running his fingers over the disturbed soil. "This is Roman, isn't it?" he murmured. Eric nodded. "Looks like it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They both understood the significance of the find. This wasn't just an old coin or an abandoned tool. This was something ancient, something important. Peter straightened up. "We should call the authorities," This needs to be handled properly." Eric exhaled, relieved. He had worried that Peter might insist on digging further themselves, but the farmer was just as cautious as he was. They made their way back to the farmhouse, where Peter placed a call to the Suffolk County Council. It wasn't long before the news reached the local archaeologists. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise over the frosted fields, a convoy of vehicles rumbled toward the farm. Among them were experts, historians, and government officials, all drawn by the whisper of something extraordinary buried beneath the soil of Hoxne. Little did they know they were about to unearth the largest collection of late Roman treasure ever discovered in Britain. The morning air was crisp as a convoy of vehicles pulled up near Peter Watling's farm. Archaeologists, historians, and local officials stepped out, their breath visible in the cold. The news had spread quickly. Something remarkable lay beneath the soil of Hoxne, and today they were going to uncover it. Eric Laws stood by the field, watching as the experts unloaded their equipment. Though he had spent years scanning the land with his metal detector, he had never witnessed anything like this, a full-scale excavation. A tall man with wire-rimmed glasses approached him. "You must be Mr. Laws," he said, extending a gloved hand. "I'm Dr. Roger Bland, from the British Museum." Eric shook his hand, feeling a strange sense of pride. "It's all still there, just like I found it," he assured him. "I didn't dig any deeper." Dr. Bland nodded approvingly. That was the right call. Disturbing a site before proper documentation can destroy vital historical context. With that, the excavation began. A team of archaeologists set up a perimeter, carefully mapping the exact location of Eric's discovery. Every movement was meticulous, no shovels, no reckless digging. Instead, they used small trowels and brushes, slowly removing the layers of earth piece by piece. Then, the first glimmers of gold and silver appeared. Gasps rippled through the team as they uncovered the first set of coins, hundreds of them, scattered among delicate silver spoons and gold jewelry. One by one, they gently lifted each artifact, documenting its position and condition. "This isn't just a collection of coins," one of the archaeologists murmured in awe. "This was someone's fortune, carefully buried, hidden from the world." More pieces emerged, a gold body chain, still intact, ornate bracelets and necklaces, their intricate designs shimmering in the sunlight. Then the discovery that made everyone pause, a set of 4 pepper pots exquisitely detailed. One in particular caught their attention. Shaped like a noblewoman, the small silver vessel bore the carved features of a Roman lady, her regal expression frozen in time. "This is the Empress Pepper Pot," Dr. Bland whispered, his fingers hovering over the artifact. "It must have belonged to someone of great wealth." As the hours passed, it became clear that this was no ordinary find. This was a treasure hoard of unprecedented scale. The coins alone numbered in the thousands. Gold, silver, and even a few bronze pieces spanning decades of Roman rule in Britain. Eric watched, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had stumbled upon. "This is history," one of the experts finally said. "Pure, untouched history." But even as they uncovered more of the treasure, one question remained. Who had buried it here, and why? As the archaeologists continued their careful excavation, the true scale of the Hoxne hoard became apparent. The collection was unlike anything ever found in Britain. Gold and silver artifacts, meticulously arranged, each piece hinting at a world lost to time. Dr. Roger Bland knelt beside a newly uncovered section of the hoard, carefully brushing away the dirt. The wooden chest that had once held the treasure had long since rotted away, leaving behind a perfect imprint in the soil. Inside that fragile outline, coins, jewelry, and silverware lay just as they had been arranged by their owner centuries ago. "This wasn't a haphazard burial," Dr. Bland murmured, turning a silver bracelet over in his hands. "This was deliberate, organized." Eric Laws stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. "You mean whoever buried this planned on coming back for it?" he asked. Dr. Bland nodded. "Most likely. Look at the way everything is packed together. Smaller wooden boxes within the chest, jewelry wrapped in fabric. This wasn't dumped in haste. This was a treasure someone meant to reclaim." But they never had. The question lingered in the air. Who had buried this immense fortune, and what had stopped them from retrieving it? Historians on site quickly examined the dates of the coins. The latest ones were from the early 5th century A.D., a time of great upheaval in Roman Britain. "This fits," one of the experts said, rubbing his chin. By the early 400s, Roman control of Britain was collapsing. The empire was under attack from multiple fronts, and Rome had withdrawn its legions from Britain to defend its heartland. "So you're saying," Eric prompted. The historian nodded. "By this time, Britain was left to fend for itself. Wealthy landowners, maybe even minor Roman officials, would have seen the chaos coming. If raiders or rival factions threatened their homes, burying their valuables might have seemed like the safest option." A chill ran down Eric's spine. He imagined it, someone, centuries ago, kneeling in this very spot, hurriedly placing their most valuable possessions into a chest, sealing it away beneath the soil, hoping to return. But they never did. Had they been killed, driven away by war? Or had they simply lost their way, unable to recall where they had hidden their fortune? The silence of the field seemed to echo with the unanswered questions. As the day wore on, more artifacts were catalogued, their secrets slowly being pieced together. Among them were personal items, a set of intricately decorated spoons, a golden chain that must have once adorned a noblewoman's neck, and an array of coins bearing the faces of long-dead Roman emperors. "This isn't just treasure," Dr. Bland finally said, standing back to survey the excavation. "This is a snapshot of the final days of Roman Britain, a glimpse into a time of uncertainty and desperation." Eric swallowed, overwhelmed by the gravity of what he had uncovered. He had come here searching for a lost hammer. Instead, he had unearthed a story buried for over 1,000 years, waiting to be told. But there was still one final chapter left to be written. What would happen to the hoard now? Word of the discovery spread like wildfire. By the next morning, journalists, historians, and museum officials descended upon the quiet farmland of Hoxne, eager to catch a glimpse of what was now being hailed as the most significant Roman treasure hoard ever found in Britain. Eric Laws, the man who had stumbled upon history while searching for a simple lost hammer, suddenly found himself at the center of an international sensation. Reporters thrust microphones toward him, cameras clicked, and headlines were already being drafted. "Mr. Laws, what was it like when you first saw the gold?" one journalist asked. "Did you think about keeping any of it?" another pressed. Eric, a humble man who had spent most of his life tending gardens, shook his head. "I knew right away this was bigger than me," he said. "This isn't just treasure, it's history. It belongs to everyone." But not everyone saw it that way. Behind the scenes, discussions were heating up about what would happen to the hoard. By British law, discoveries of gold and silver that were buried with the intent of later retrieval were considered treasure trove, meaning they legally belonged to the crown. However, treasure trove laws also ensured that the finder and landowner were entitled to a reward equal to the market value of the discovery. It wasn't long before an official valuation was conducted. The total worth of the Hoxton hoard? £1.75 million. The sum was staggering, more money than Eric Laws or Peter Watling had ever dreamed of. The government agreed that, as per the law, the entire amount would be split between them, but Eric had already made up his mind. "I didn't do this for the money," he told reporters. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." True to his word, he donated a portion of his reward to local charities and historical research projects. Peter, too, used the money wisely, ensuring that his farm, where history had been uncovered, would continue for generations to come. Meanwhile, the British Museum prepared to house the treasure. Carefully restored and preserved, the hoard was placed on display for the world to see. The intricate golden jewelry, the thousands of Roman coins, the delicate silver pepper pots, each piece was a testament to a lost world, a story frozen in time. And yet, one mystery still remained. Who had buried the hoard, and why had they never returned? The answer had been swallowed by time. The owner of the treasure had disappeared, their fate unknown. All that remained were the silent whispers of history, buried beneath the soil, until one ordinary man, with an ordinary metal detector, brought them back into the light. Months passed, but the excitement surrounding the Hoxton hoard never faded. Scholars pored over the artifacts, deciphering their significance, while thousands of visitors flocked to the British Museum to witness the breathtaking collection in person. Eric Laws, once just a retired gardener with a hobby, had become a legend in the world of archaeology. Invitations to interviews, honorary awards, and even documentary features followed, but Eric remained the same humble man who had set out to find a lost hammer. One afternoon, as he stood in the grand halls of the British Museum, he gazed upon the very treasure he had unearthed. The gleaming gold body chain, the intricate silver pepper pots, the countless Roman coins, each artifact had been cleaned, preserved, and displayed under glass, admired by thousands. Beside him, Dr. Roger Bland watched the visitors marvel at the discovery. "You know, Eric," he said, "if this had been found under different circumstances, by someone less honest, we might never have known its full story." Eric chuckled. "Well, I didn't think I had a choice. Once I saw it, I knew it wasn't meant to be kept by one man." Dr. Bland nodded. "And because of that, generations to come will get to see this piece of history with their own eyes. That's the true reward. For all the gold and silver the hoard contained, the greatest treasure turned out to be the knowledge it provided. It offered a rare glimpse into the final days of Roman Britain, a time of turmoil and uncertainty, when even the wealthiest citizens were forced to bury their fortunes and flee. But beyond history books and museum halls, the Hoxton hoard left behind something even more powerful, a lesson in integrity. Eric Laws could have kept the discovery a secret. He could have dug it up himself, piece by piece, and sold it off to collectors. But instead, he chose the path of honesty, and in doing so, He ensured that a hidden treasure would become a shared legacy, belonging not just to one man, but to the entire world. As he turned to leave the museum, Eric smiled. He may have started his journey searching for a simple lost hammer, but in the end, he had found something far greater, a place in history. And somewhere, in the silent whispers of time, the owner of the hoard, whoever they had been, might have smiled too, knowing their treasure had finally been found.